What would you do if, in the middle of mountain fog, a towering creature, over 7 feet tall, covered head to toe in fur, stood silently watching, and then vanished? The truth is, it wasn't there to attack. It came to deliver something to Thomas Callahan, a 68-year-old former wildfire firefighter, a Bigfoot child, locked in a rusted cage, carrying the scars of a secret experiment. For decades, Thomas had saved hundreds of lives from raging forest fires, but he had never faced anything as strange as this. Within days, he learned to speak with Bigfoot, using a simple signal, 3 heavy knocks, and discovered how to help them disappear before the hunting party reached his cabin, even as they closed in from every side. One snowy night, more than 10 massive figures emerged from the tree line, standing still in the mist, all because he knocked 3 times on the fence. The hunters fled. The police saw it happen but reported back only, "Nothing to see. Miss this story, and you'll never know that the blessing of the forest is real, and why Bigfoot chose to trust a single human being." Mornings in Cedar Hollow come in low and quiet, like the forest holding its breath. Mist drifts off the Olympic foothills and pools in the hollows behind Tom Callahan's cabin. He stands at the chopping block with a maul in his hands, boots planted in frosted dirt, shoulders working in the slow rhythm learned on fire lines long ago. The blade bites, cedar splits. The damp heartwood gives off a clean, peppery smell that clings to his flannel and the steam of his breath. A crow keys up once and goes silent. The whole ridge seems to lean in. 3 knocks roll out from the timber. Not close, not far, even, deliberate. He lifts the maul and freezes. Sound carries strange in weather like this, but these don't smear in the fog. They stack, 1, 2, 3. They drum through the trunks of western red cedar and Douglas fir, as if the woods itself had bones. He has heard knocks like that before, back when a Pulaski handle cracked against the steel side of a tanker to move a crew. Only those were quick and nervous. These are slower, older, deep enough to stir the ash he keeps tamped down inside. He looks past the woodpile to the long pitch of slope rising behind his place. Mist laces through sword ferns and old stumps. For a second he thinks it's a wind gust pushing the fog, until the shape resolves. Too tall for a man, too broad for a bear. Shoulders squared, head turned toward him. It stands perfectly still on an open patch of duff, a dark post set where no post should be. The air around it shivers like heat above asphalt. He doesn't blink, not yet. You learn on lines that blinking can cost you the moment that tells you what the fire wants. The figure holds. Then the fog lifts, thin as breath, and it is gone, like someone erased a mark from a slate. He sets them all down, not because he's frightened, exactly, but because something about the cadence of those knocks feels like a request that expects an answer. He listens hard. Elk sometimes clack antlers. Woodpeckers tap rapid nervous code. This wasn't that. This was 3 strikes measured out by a hand that understood weight. Another quiet fills in, thick as felt. He straightens, rubs the ache in his lower back, lets his eyes do one last sweep of the tree line. The ridge looks ordinary again. Salal slick with dew, moss rucked up on nurse logs, the faint tread of a deer path angling toward a cut bank. A patch of sun tries to break through and fails. Somewhere upstream, the creek says a slow, cold thing to the stones. He catches himself counting heartbeats to match the knocks. Habit is a stubborn animal. He steps onto the porch. The boards carry his weight with a small complaint. Boot prints he left earlier have filled with damp shine. The cabin windows reflect a pale man with a jaw like an old hinge and hair gone the color of bark dust. Inside, coffee waits in a dented percolator. A photograph faces down under a recipe card. A wool coat hangs on a nail by the door. The life he has pared down to what won't burn. He touches the scar on his forearm. faint ladder of white from the fire season of '76, and realizes his shoulders have come up around his neck the way they used to when a crown fire was walking the ridge and the radios went to static. He lowers them, breathes through his nose. The taste of cedar is in his mouth. The morning is still young. The day can still be ordinary. He tells himself that, and the telling almost takes. From the slope, the mist sloughs off another stand of fur and slides into the draw. He sees nothing there now, but the absence gives shape to what had been. He remembers the stories Maggie Crow Feather tells on market days, the way she says some presences don't rush, they just arrive. Out here, the forest keeps its own calendar. Some seasons you can only feel. He picks up the maul again. More to test the weight in his hands than to split another round. Sap threads the blade and sticks to his fingers. A jay scolds once and shuts up like a door. The light shifts. Time thins. The urge to call out rises and stalls because he doesn't know what name would fit the thing he saw. A name makes a promise. He has learned to be careful with promises. He stows the maul by the door, wipes his palms on his jeans, and reaches for the handle. Inside is heat and coffee and a radio that mostly finds weather. He turns the knob and lets the latch ride on the strike plate. The breath he's been holding thins into the room with him. He steps across the threshold and loses the forest's cold from his skin. Then it comes, a sound so soft it almost gets mistaken for wind in the grass. A small, stuttering moan, thin as a thread, rising and falling like a child trying not to cry. It doesn't come from the porch or the yard or the creek bed. It comes from that same patch of slope where the dark shape stood and vanished. The sound carries the way the knocks carried, clean, precise, as if the trees themselves had decided to carry it to him. He stops with one glove still half on, the door eased back against his hip, coffee forgotten. The moan wavers, gathers, and returns, and the morning that was about to choose ordinary refuses. He leaves the door half-latched and follows the sound into the timber. Breath fogging in short bursts, boots sinking into duff that drinks noise like a sponge. The ridge behind the cabin opens into a shallow draw, where a seasonal creek runs in spring and goes to bones by October. Today, the creek bed is a braid of pale stones and cracked mud, the kind of place deer use to cross without leaving a print. He steps down carefully, tests slick rocks with his heel, feels the cold locked into the stone climb through the leather into his feet. The moan threads through the mist again, thin and urgent, and it pulls him upstream like a scent. The light is the color of tin. Sword ferns bead water. Salal leaves shine like they have been varnished. He slips once on a patch of moss, catches himself on a root, and tastes iron where he bit his lip. He remembers other mornings walking gullies while smoke rolled over ridges, remembers calling out names into wind, remembers getting no answer and walking anyway. He keeps moving. The sound lifts, fades, lifts again. And now he can place it on the right bank where the slope tightens and two rocks lean together like stalled oxen. What he finds there looks wrong because it does not belong to the forest. A cage slumps between the stones as if the earth tried to swallow it and gave up halfway. Inch-thick wire, bent and buckled. A padlock streaked red with rust. Dead grass quilted into corners. The stink of old metal and fear. He squats, steadying his palm on a rock washed smooth by 100 winters, and peers through the grid. Eyes look back at him. Big, glass black, bright with panic. A small body crouches hard against the far corner, fur matted and silvered like ash at the tips, chest rising too fast, every breath a dry saw. He doesn't move. He lets the silence say he means no harm, the way an animal might. The little one trembles anyway, tries to press itself farther into a space already too small, and he hears the cage itself complain with a wince of wire. The lock is more suggestion than mechanism, but it will not give to his fingers. He works a hand axe from his belt and tests the throat of the shackle, then swaps to the hammer he keeps for fence staples. The first tap flakes rust. The second loosens the hinge. He breathes slow. He doesn't swing hard because the child is inside and fear makes bodies jump toward hurt. He braces the hasp with the axe head, sets the hammer face on the lock, and leans weight instead of force. The metal groans, resists, then coughs up a clod of red dust and lets go. He hooks the door with 2 fingers and eases it open. The hinges creak a complaint that seems too loud for the quiet the morning has become. He doesn't reach in. He knows what that feels like to something cornered. He eases back on his haunches to make himself smaller and lets air move through the cage mouth. On the slope above, fog thins against a clutch of maples, and that is when he feels the pressure of a gaze settle on him like a hand. He looks up without lifting his head, the way you do when a hawk shadows the road, and he finds it standing just beyond the rise, massive, broad through the chest, fur the color of wet bark, a heat he can feel through the cold, eyes dark and set deep, holding a kind of patience that is not human but understands what waiting costs. The shoulders ripple once as if with pain. The head tilts to one side in a small, exact motion that reads not as threat but as a question. He doesn't stand. He doesn't speak. He knows the wrong kind of sound can break a fragile line. He lets his hands show themselves, open and empty, palms angled toward the ground. The little one makes a sound like a trapped breath, braces a hand against the threshold, and tests the world beyond the cage with 1 foot. It is unsteady, too thin for a creature that should be all spring and mischief. He sees the ribs under fur. He sees the way the left shoulder flinches and won't take weight for long. He feels heat rise in his own neck, not anger at the forest, never that, but at whoever dragged a thing like this into iron and walked away. The small body spills forward and catches itself on both hands. It shakes, steadies, and comes as far as his knee before stopping, nostrils wide to take him in, eyes flicking once past him toward the slope. He turns his face toward the mother without giving his back to the child. She does not move down. She does something stranger. She drifts 1 step to her right and lays the flat of her hand against a basalt boulder as tall as a car hood. The hand is enormous, fur rucked with old burrs, skin showing dark where the fur thins at the palm. She lifts it, waits a beat, and brings it back to stone. 3 strikes, spaced, low. The sound carries into him in the same measure as the knocks at his cabin, but closer now, warmer, like the echo has skin. It is not a warning. He feels that truth seat itself in him with the surety of a tool that fits your hand. It is a mark, a sign laid down between them like a bridge that can hold weight. He hears Maggie's stories crease open in his head, the ones about the forest speaking in code if you keep faith with it long enough to learn the grammar. And he knows this is not accident. Mist sifts through the trees and turns the light milky. The creek bed holds its breath. He nods once, small, as if answering a question asked without words. He reaches for the child, not to take, but to offer steadiness. It surprises him by touching his wrist first, a quick soft press that leaves heat on his skin. He rises carefully, tucking his arm under its weight the way he once lifted injured fawns, the way he once lifted his son when sleep claimed him on the porch steps. The muscles in his back remember how to be careful. He looks up the slope again. The mother hasn't moved. Her breath makes little feathers in the cold. Something like relief loosens her stance, the shake in her shoulders settling. She watches him turn toward the dry creek and the long, uneven ground home requires. She does not follow. Not yet. The forest narrows into a path of wet leaves and old roots. He takes the first step, and the sound she left on the stone seems to ride with him. 3 beats to hold the line between them. He carries the small body close, 1 arm under the ribs, 1 palm steadying the back, and the forest seems to hold its breath to watch him pass. The creek bed gives way to a faint deer trail that threads between cedar trunks and nurse logs. Mist snags on sword ferns and slides off in pale sheets. His boots find purchase on slick roots by habit more than sight. Behind him, not constant, but present, a second rhythm moves. Heavy steps sinking deeper than his, a weight that knows how to spread itself so the sound rides low. He doesn't turn. He maps the distance by feel. 30 yards, maybe less when the brush tightens. The air carries damp earth, sap, and something else. A musky tang like wet fur warmed by a living body. The little one shakes against him, then settles, breath hitching in quick bursts. He keeps his voice inside his chest. He keeps his hands steady. Once the trail tilts and he slips, catching himself with a hip against a stump, and pain shoots through his bruised thigh. The small hand clenches his shirt and won't let go. He says nothing, only breathes slow so the ribs under his palm can borrow his cadence. Up the slope, the line of alder gives way to the back meadow, browned-out grass slick with dew. The cabin squatting beyond like a low-shouldered thing that's weathered more than its share. On the porch, he pauses. He can feel the eyes before he sees her. He turns his head just enough to catch the shape on the hill, half erased by fog, massive and still, her outline cut from the gray. She stands at the edge of salal and snowberry as if the shrubs themselves asked her to keep watch. No sound, no motion. Only that patient gravity, a presence that steadies his spine and rattles it at once. He tips his chin a fraction. A small answer. She doesn't come closer. She doesn't go. Inside, the cabin is warm with the morning's fire. He sets the child on a wool blanket spread over a trunk and moves by instinct. Enamel pot. Clean jar. A bottle he keeps for orphaned fawns and raccoon kits locals bring when they don't know what else to do. He pours goat's milk he keeps chilled for emergencies, thins it with warm water, tests a drop on his wrist. The small one watches everything, eyes too large in the narrow face, silvered fur catching firelight. It flinches when the bottle appears, then leans without deciding to, mouth working, a hesitant latch turning hungry on the second pull. He feels the first real weight of relief in hours. The tiny throat moves, swallow after swallow, and the sound is the plainest music he knows. He checks the left shoulder. The flinch is real, a tightness under the skin where pain lives. He runs a fingertip along the fur to the joint, careful not to press. The little one allows it with a wary glance, then returns to the bottle. He sees the ribs counting time. He sees the dirt ground into the fur at the knees. He has cleaned wounds like this. He has cleaned worse. He warms cloth in a bowl and wipes mud and rust flakes from the feet, the palms, the soft crease behind each knee. The smell of old metal lifts and leaves. The small body exhales a breath he didn't know it was holding. Light leaks out of the afternoon as if the woods drink it. Dusk stands early in this country. He locks the door out of habit, and because something old in him wants the click. He builds the fire up, checks the window latch, draws the curtain halfway, then stops himself from closing it all the way. Outside, fog thickens into a pale wall. The hill is only suggestion now, but he imagines he can still feel the line that runs from his chest to the place she stood. Night drops with no ceremony. Coyotes speak far off and then go quiet. The bottle is empty. The child sags into the blanket, too tired to fight sleep for long. He covers the small body with an old army sweater and sits on the floor nearby, back to the trunk, knees up, hands loose between them. He listens to the fire whisper and to the cabin answer with its tiny expansion noises as heat finds the boards. Then the steps come. Not fast, not probing. Heavy, deliberate, spacing set by legs longer than a man's. They cross the yard grass without troubling the wind chime on the porch beam. They reach the steps and stall. A board moans. The weight shifts. Through the curtain's gap a shape rises, and the window glass turns into a shallow mirror with a shadow laid over it. Shoulders like a standing bear. Head turned slightly so one eye could find the room's glow. The porch stays intact, but the quiet grows a grain to it. a texture that prickles skin. He doesn't move. The small one stirs, ears twitching, then sinks deeper. He lets the minute happen. He lets the fire do the only talking. The shadow neither leans in nor backs away. It holds the threshold as if learning the size of the house and the promise that lives inside it. He has been on porches like this in other seasons, waiting for news to come down a road. He knows how to keep a long silence from turning brittle. After a while, 2 minutes, 5. Time stretches in fog. The weight slides back off the boards. The steps cross the porch. They move past the window and down into the yard, then into the grass where the sound thins and becomes part of the night. He waits longer than he needs to. Only when the coyotes speak again does he stand, pull the curtain, and ease a log onto the coals. Sparks bloom and vanish. The room smells like cedar and goat's milk and wet wool, and the faintest trace of musk left on his sleeve. He looks at his hands, at the small smudge of silver hair caught in his cuff, and feels the strange certainty that the line between the hill and the cabin is not a line at all, but a bridge. He will have to walk it again. And soon. By noon, the fog burns off the meadow and leaves a pale sun with no warmth. Tom stacks split cedar by the porch and tries to keep his mind inside small tasks. The child sleeps in a nest of wool in his old sweater, breath ticking against the knit in even counts. From the road beyond the trees comes the rip of a pickup downshifting, a pause, then a whistle of surprise you can hear even without words. A man in a blaze orange vest has cut his morning short to drive the ridge, and through his windshield he's just seen something moving by Tom's fence line, something too big for a man and too upright for a bear. He tells himself it was light and angle, but he still leans on his horn like you lean on a thought that won't settle. By 2 o'clock, the story stops for coffee at the diner. A waitress with a pencil behind her ear says the old fireman up on County Road 6 has a stray you wouldn't want under your bed. Someone laughs, someone doesn't, and a logger with a CB in his Ford repeats it on Channel 19. A BLM tech fueling a government Bronco at the Sinclair hears a half version, makes a note to radio it in, then does. Large mammal activity near private residence, possible habituation. Another voice asks for the block and lot. The tech shrugs and says, "The retired guy. The one out by the draw." In a bar off the highway, a man who doesn't order beer unless it comes in a bottle touches a pager clipped to his belt and excuses himself to make a call from the payphone. He doesn't use a quarter from his own pocket. Sheriff Caleb Boone rolls up Tom's drive at 3, dust blooming around the tires and falling quiet. He steps out with his hat pushed back a notch and the caution he learned from the man on this porch years ago. They stand with the railing between them like a truce line. Boone's eyes take in the stacked wood, the washed bowls, the small shape asleep just inside the door, and covered like a secret you'd only show to family. His voice is low, without heat. "Word's running. A hunter says he saw something big as a bear near your fence. BLM is sniffing, and there's a group that's been nosing around since last winter. They don't post badges, they post bounties." Tom keeps his hands open, palms flat on the rail. "It's safe here," he says, and knows how thin that sounds with the world gathering. Boone nods once. "I believe you. They won't. If they think you're keeping it, they'll tag the mother or take the little one to a lab with fluorescent lights. You know the drill. I can slow the first group by losing a memo. I can't slow the second. If anybody asks, I saw nothing. But you need to move like the woods see you." He tips his head at the door. "Keep the curtains loose. Keep the truck ready. And Tom, if it comes to it, you knock 3 times on something that carries. You let the forest do what it does." When Boone leaves, the yard feels too exposed, like a stage under bad lights. Tom closes the door and opens it again because closing feels like fear, and he can't afford that. He checks the bottle, warms more milk, listens to the little swallow sounds that make a room honest. The afternoon slides to the edge of evening, and a crow calls 3 times and goes quiet. Footsteps come up the path, light and certain, and he knows the cadence before he sees her. Maggie Crowfeather steps out of the salal with a scarf tied tight against the chill and cedar needles snagged in her skirt hem. She looks past him to the small bundle on the blanket, and her eyes soften the way mountains do when cloud breaks. She puts a small bundle in his hand, smooth and warm from her palm. A cedar token, oval as a river stone, carved with 3 clean notches like little doors in a row. The surface smells like sap and smoke. "For the threshold," she says. "For your pocket, for your heart if it won't listen. When the rangers knock with paper, fine. When the others knock with teeth, don't answer with doors. Answer with this." She taps the notches. 3 means it trusts you. 3 means you answer in kind. And listen, some knocks are greetings, some are summons. You'll know. He wants to ask how you know the difference when your whole life has been sirens and radio codes, and the same number meaning 2 fires 6 miles apart. She saves him the asking. "You'll feel it in your bones. The old ones don't waste your time." She studies his face like it's a map and nods once, satisfied, then eases back down the path, leaving the smell of sage and wood smoke and something older than both. Night lands fast and full. Wind pulls at the eaves. The child dozes and startles and dozes again. Tom walks the small yard, checks the latch on the gate he never locks, fingers the cedar charm in his coat pocket as if it can warm through wool. Out past the draw, a dog barks at nothing and won't commit to a second bark. He sets the kettle on and turns the radio knob until the weather voice fades to static, then kills it because static makes a man think of all the calls he didn't catch in time. The first 3 knocks arrive like a heartbeat fat with blood. Deep, close, drawn out so each one has its own shadow. They don't come from the porch. They roll up from the timber, from that basalt shoulder where she set her hand this morning, from wherever the forest keeps its drums. The sound climbs the posts and moves through the boards into his bones. The second set follows, a fraction faster, like breath that has started to run. He is already at the door, cedar token in his fist, when the third set strikes. Low, urgent, stretching the last beat as if to pull something across a gap. He doesn't kill the lamp. He doesn't reach for a rifle. He steps outside into the cold that smells like iron and wet leaf. And the yard answers him with silence so complete, it feels like a held note waiting for the next bar. The yard holds the last of the sound like a bowl, then lets it spill back into the timber. He stands in the cold until his breath hurts, listens for engines, for voices, for the wrong kind of metal. Nothing answers. He understands the measure of those 3 beats now. Not a warning, a call to keep faith. He slips inside, shuts the door on the latch without locking it, and moves with the quiet hands he used to use on fire lines when one careless clank could draw wind the wrong way. He sets the kettle to steam and pulls a galvanized wash tub from under the bed. He blends warm water and cool in the old way, testing with the inside of his wrist until it feels like a safe river in July. A drop of mild soap breaks the surface like oil. He pads a folded towel at the bottom and carries the tub to the hearth. The child watches from the blanket with eyes too alert for its size. When he lifts it, he feels no fight, only the stiff caution of something that has learned to brace for pain. He lowers the small body into the water. Fur flattens. A tight breath leaves a narrow chest and takes the edge off the room. He works from neck to shoulder with a cloth, strokes short and sure, speaking with the steadiness of his hands instead of a voice. Mud ghosts away in brown veils. Rust-red smears stain the water and turn pale. He rinses with a tin cup, never pouring over the face. The child takes it in, a wary scholar, and after a while its jaw unclenches in a soft sound that might be relief slips between small teeth. Under the left shoulder, where skin thins and heat collects, he finds it. A puckered brand tucked into fur like a secret. 2 narrow burns that cross and seal into an X, edges shiny, center pale, the shape a heat makes when it is laid with purpose. His hand stops on instinct. He knows the accidental scars of wire and briar. This is not that. This is a mark someone meant to last. He lifts the lamp and studies the pattern. Memory reaches up from a place he keeps boarded and lights it without mercy. He has seen deliberate heat like this twice. Once, on a black bear, a university crew had collared near the hoe. The animal tagged for a study that promised it would teach people how to be kinder while beginning with pain. And once, closer to bone, on a fallen crewman whose harness buckle branded him in the seconds between a flare-up and a grand silence. It feels obscene to have both memories in the same room with the sound of a child breathing. The room tilts and becomes summer of '76 in a rush. The air filthy with white ash. A sky the color of old pennies. A radio spitting numbers over numbers while he asked for tankers that were never coming. He can smell retardant and hear a woman on a party line telling him she can't find her husband, and he can see the seconds he gave away to pull a family through a door. He made the right call for them. He made the wrong call for his own. The X under his fingers burns like a verdict he never appealed. He blinks out of the heat and back into cedar light. The mark is healed but angry. He warms a dab of salve in his palm, the mix he uses for range burns on deer and the rare dog that stumbles in from the road, and smooths it along the edges without touching the center. The child tolerates it, a small shiver running the ribs, fingers curling, then uncurling to press awkwardly against his shirt as if to say, "Keep going." He works with the patience he used to save for board-by-board overhaul after a blow-up, when only slow hands and water stop a ruin from relighting. He wraps the little one in a towel, then the sweater, and carries it back to the blanket. The lamp's glow lays a warm gold on silver fur. He ladles warm goat's milk into the bottle and settles cross-legged near the fire, the way he once sat when his son fell asleep on his chest without asking permission. The small mouth finds the nipple, learns the angle, and drinks with a steadier rhythm than this morning. He watches the throat move, counts the ribs, listens to the swallow, and catalogs what is missing. No cough, no rattle, only weariness and a body that has forgotten to expect kindness. He looks at the scar again and understands more than he wants. The mother was taken, not once, long enough to be handled, long enough to be marked like property, long enough to learn the sound a padlock makes when it decides to give. She came back from that, and today, she set her child at the feet of a man who spends his days making sure flames don't eat wood the way they ate his life. She did not lose him by chance. She placed him. And when she struck stone 3 times, she didn't just echo a code in the trees. She answered a question she had already decided. He feels the cedar token Maggie carved warm in his pocket, as if the wood remembers the tree it came from. He closes his fingers around it and makes a small promise that feels bigger than the room. No calls to people who write reports. No doors open to men who show up in good boots with the wrong kind of smile. If he has to be a bridge, he will be a bridge that holds. Wind slides under the eaves and presses a low sigh along the rafters. Outside, the fog thickens until the window becomes a dull coin. The bottle empties and the child's lashes sink to its cheek. He sets the bottle down and listens hard, somewhere past the draw, far enough that the sound must travel through trees to reach him. Something metal sings and goes quiet, a thin, ugly note he knows from traps and bad nights. He keeps still so the room doesn't scare the truth away. A breath later, too faint for a man who doesn't know what to hear, a voice in the timber lets out one torn, careful sound and swallows it. He doesn't reach for a coat yet. He tucks the child deeper, banks the fire without killing it, and sits with the knowledge settling in. The night has more to say. He will have to go find the part that won't come to him. He leaves the lamp low and the child bundled deep in his sweater, slips the cedar token into his pocket, and steps into a night that smells like iron and wet leaf. A skin of new snow dusts the grass. Not enough to hide the ground, enough to make every step a ledger. He follows the thin, ugly note of metal he heard before, listens between his heartbeats until the forest starts talking again in small truths. A bent grass blade, A hair snagged on salal. Boot tracks where no neighbor walks. Toes pointed toward the draw. He moves past the gate he never locks and into timber that holds cold the way a hand holds breath. The creek bed is a dull ribbon of rock under frost. He kills his flashlight twice to let his eyes earn what they see. A stand of second-growth fir narrows the path and then opens into a pocket of pale where the snow has taken. There, the world sharpens. A sapling bowed over with a cable snare cinched to it. The loop pulled tight on something heavy. Blood marks the snow the way a map marks a town. Bright, precise, too much to ignore. She is down on one knee, the other leg braced and shaking, the cable biting above the ankle where fur thins to skin. The loop is a dull necklace gone mean, teeth of a one-way lock set hard, steel buried half an inch where it has no business. Her breath comes in heat you can see, a slow engine pushing through pain. When she turns her head toward him, the air feels thinner. The sound she makes is not threat. It is the sound a door makes when it has carried weight too long. He doesn't pretend he isn't afraid. He names the fear so it won't name him. He keeps his hands where she can see them and sets his pack down in the snow loud enough for the sound to count. From it, he pulls fence pliers, a handsaw with a worn handle, a short length of rope, a ratchet strap that has pulled trucks out of ditches and once a mule from a culvert. He taps his chest with a cedar token. 3 soft knuckles through wool. Then he answers the trees the only way he knows. 3 measured knocks with his fist on the nearest trunk. The sound carries, returns, settles. He speaks with motion more than mouth. He circles wide, never behind. Angle and distance like he's walking up to a hot line that might lay down and get back up. The cable's anchor bite is sunk deep into the sapling. He sees boot prints around it in a pattern that makes his jaw set. Someone checked this snare recently. Someone walked away hoping for this exact shape in the snow. He cuts his jacket free of his shoulders and holds it up so she can watch it move, then drapes it over her eyes, not to blind, to lower the world a notch. Her chest rumbles, low, not a growl so much as a question. He answers by kneeling where her hand could end him in one motion and staying anyway. He slides the rope around the sapling above the anchor and throws a quick loop to the ratchet strap, runs the strap to a thicker trunk behind him, leans his weight, and starts the slow click-click that will steal tension from the loop without stealing her from herself. Every click lifts the cable off flesh a breath. Blood wells, bright against gray fur, and then slows because pressure is easing. He takes the fence pliers and finds the small tab on the lock. It is welded cheap, bent by hands that didn't plan to meet their work again. He pries. It resists. He pries again and feels steel give the way a stubborn nail does when wood finally admits defeat. The loop loosens a fraction. She jerks, and the strap groans, and he thinks of radio knots and paper maps and a boy who laughed with peanut butter on his face. And he keeps going because stopping is a choice he doesn't have anymore. He leans his shoulder into the sapling, sets the pliers, twists hard. The tab snaps. The loop slackens. The cable glides back over the cut it made, leaving a white groove that fills with red, then pink, then nothing. The leg buckles. She sags forward and catches herself with both hands, jacket slipping so one eye finds him through cloth. He eases the loop free and tosses the dead snake of cable away like it could still bite. He keeps the jacket where it is to give the moment a soft wall. She draws breath through the big muscles of her back. Snow ticks off branches. The strap creaks as he releases tension slow, the way you let go of a door that doesn't know it's been freed. When he pulls the jacket, she doesn't lunge. She studies him with that impossible patience turned down just enough to let gratitude through. Her gaze holds him where he kneels until he feels the stupid prick of tears in a cold wind. He steps back 2 paces and lowers his hands. She tests the leg. It holds. Barely. Blood dapples the snow like red berries knocked down by storm. She stands to her full height then, a line drawn straight through fog, and the night feels smaller around her. Her eyes lift over his shoulder to the dark beyond him, and for a breath he thinks she's looking at nothing. Then he hears it too. Farther downslope, the faint electric whine of an engine cooling. A door, hush-click shut. The wrong kind of quiet between men. She looks at him one last time, long enough to count, and the look carries weight heavier than any thanks he could accept. She moves off the snare line, weight light on the bad leg, vanishing into Salal without breaking a twig. He coils the cable with shaking hands and tucks it into his pack because evidence is better trouble than rumor. Snow starts again, small dry flakes that hush the world. He stands in the new white, hears a boot scrape stone where no boot should be, and knows the night hasn't finished with him. Engines climb the ridge at dusk and die one by one. Doors thud soft like fists into pillows, and the timber holds its breath. Tom has the cellar hatch open before the first flashlight breaks the trees. Old boards lift, cool air rises with the smell of damp earth and apples that lived here 20 years ago. He lowers the small body down the narrow steps, sets a wool blanket on the dirt, tucks the sweater close, and leaves the bottle within reach the way you leave a nightlight on for a child. Back soon, he mouths, not to be heard, but to steady his own hands. The hatch shuts with a sigh. He pads with a folded rag so it won't speak twice. Light rakes the yard in white blades. Men move in a wide crescent, boots whispering in wet grass. Some wear BLM windbreakers, collars up, eyes hard with rules. Others wear ambition. Their beams climb the porch posts, skip the windows, slice through cedar boughs, and return as haze. Muffled radio, coordinates, grid squares, the kind of talk that pretends a forest is a map and not a living thing. A private voice rides under the official one, sells certainty cheap. He can hear safeties thumbed off like crickets. Sheriff Caleb Boone rolls in quiet, parks sideways to throw a shadow over the fence line, and walks up with his hand open and his hat pulled down. The two men don't touch. They don't need to. "You got company," Boone says low, like weather. "I can keep them honest on paper. The others don't write it down." His eyes tip toward the cabin. "You do what you do. I'll do what I don't." Tom steps off the porch into the cold and doesn't raise his voice. "Yard's mine. Timber's not. Watch your steps." He palms the cedar token in his pocket until its notches line with the scars in his hand. The hunters fan wider, trying to flank a house as if a house could run. One of them lifts his light toward the slope where the basalt shoulder waits under Salal. Somewhere above, a jay scolds and then chokes on the end of its call like it thought better of it. He walks to the corner post of his fence. Cedar split years ago, grain tight as old rope. He raises the carpenter's hammer he keeps in a loop by the gate and lets the head find the wood the way a heart finds home. 3 strikes. Spaced, measured. The post turns the blows into a voice lower than any man's, and the yard carries it into the timber like a bell rolled in felt. Silence swells thick and near. Then the forest answers. From the basalt shoulder, 3. From farther left where the creek braids under frost. 3 more, slower, like a big chest working. From behind the second-growth firs near the old skid road. 3 that start so low they seem to rise from dirt. Then another set above the draw, colder, clean as knuckles on stone. Different hands, different distances. The same promise. Beams jump, jerk, wash across trunks and come back dry. A man in a black parka laughs twice too loud, then forgets how. "What is that?" someone asks. But no one answers because the question is a door, and every man on the line knows what's waiting behind it. The knocks continue, not random, not aggressive. A net tightening with music instead of rope. Fog slides in from the creek and climbs shin, knee, thigh. The yard shortens. The world loses its edges the way a photograph clouds in a breath. Shapes arrive where the fog decides to end. 1, 2, 3. 4 at least, maybe more if you count the way the dark stacks behind them. tall beyond a man by a head and a half, shoulders like the ceiling of a low barn, heat pluming in slow ropes, no teeth, no roar, only that stillness that belongs to old trees and wolves that eat rarely. Somebody's courage breaks before their line does. A hunter takes half a step back, then another, muzzle dropping because instinct says point at the ground when you don't understand the sky. Another man stumbles on a root and catches himself on a partner's sleeve. Both lights jump and strobe the faces of the nearest shapes. Eyes don't flash like deer. They take light and give none back. BLM Rangers hold. Trained to, but the training is a thin coat in this cold. One lifts his mic, hesitates, drops it. Boone doesn't. He tips his radio up and speaks into it like a man ordering pie. Negative visual, he says. Copy. Nothing here but fog and fence posts. He lets the sentence sit, then adds, advise hold back from residents. No sign of target. No sign of anything. His eyes stay on Tom while he lies for both of them. And for once the lie weighs the same as the truth. The knock's slow. The nearest shape shifts weight, not forward, not back. Testing the night the way a hand tests bathwater for a child. Tom keeps his hammer low, palm on the head, the gesture of a man done with tools for the day. He can feel the hatch in his spine like a pulse. The cellar holds quiet the way a chapel does when snow seals the doors. One of the ambitious men breaks. He mutters something ugly, turns, and the brush takes him as if it's been hungry for that particular flavor. The rest break on different clocks. Some walk out fast. Some back out slow. The beams thin, then stop. Engines cough awake down on the road and push their noise uphill until it thins into trees. Fog thickens again, just enough to take the edges off gratitude. The silhouettes unhook from the yard, step backward into the timber, and are no longer there in the way a hand pulled from water is still felt. Boone breathes out his first honest breath in a minute and tips his hat brim with 2 fingers. Might rain, he says to the air, and to the radio, and to the past. Tom listens for one more set that doesn't come. The night draws its curtain an inch. He touches the fence post with his palm, warm where the blows rang, and waits long enough to learn whether the quiet is an ending or a held note. Somewhere below, a kettle clicks off the boil, though he didn't leave it on. He opens his hand and finds the cedar token has marked his skin. Dawn comes without color, just a thinning of dark and a gray light poured through fir and cedar. The yard wears a crust of frost, like breath held too long. Tom stands with his coat open to the chill, one hand on the fence post where last night's blows still live under the grain. The house behind him is quiet. The cellar holds the little one's soft sleep and the whisper of his sweater rubbing fur. He waits the way a man waits for a weather break he can feel but not see yet. A jay calls once and stops. The fog parts along the upper slope the way water lifts from a stone. She steps out. Not sudden, not slow, as if the trees agreed to set her down in the open. Shoulders easy now, leg careful but holding. Fur the color of wet bark and winter grass. Steam rises off her like the last of night leaving a pond. She looks less like a shadow and more like a fact the ridge has always known. He doesn't move to meet her. He lets the space say welcome without asking anything back. Distance folds by its own logic. Salal brushes her thigh. A spray of snowberry seeds clings to her fur. She keeps her head level, eyes steady, breath a low engine in the cold. When she reaches him, the yard feels smaller, almost tender, as if the ground wants to keep this exact shape. Her hand comes up, big as a dinner plate, fur dark with dew. The palm shows through where the hair thins, skin thick as a saddle and scored with work. She rests it on his shoulder. Not heavy, just enough to be known. Heat moves through the wool into bone. The weight is a sentence that needs no words. The kind Maggie told him about. The thanks that travels farther than a mouth can send it. He keeps his hands open, pressed to his thighs, because this moment belongs to her. The cedar token warms in his pocket through his skin and through the old ache stitched into him from summers he doesn't say out loud. The smell from her hand is cedar pitch and wet stone, and something like smoke without the hurt in it. He looks up and finds her eyes, and there is no accusation there, only a recognition that hits him with a force he's been ducking for years. You kept faith. You answered when called. The cellar latch clicks once like a bird-pecking seed. A small shape bumps the hatch, then wriggles through. The little one runs with the unsure speed of something that has slept warm and wakes to a new world. It comes straight for his knees, the way it did in the creek bed, presses its head against his leg with a soft thud like a heartbeat. He drops one hand to steady it and feels the weight true and alive. He laughs without meaning to, a single breath shaped into sound, and the sound startles him because it has been so long since that tone lived in his mouth. The mother lowers her hand, brushes the back of her knuckles along the small one's shoulder, and the gesture holds all the promises a body can keep. She looks past Tom to the porch, to the agate-colored window, to the table inside. He doesn't understand why until later. For now she turns, a hinge of hips and grace, and the child goes with her, a silvered flicker at her side. They cross the grass without a mark he can keep, the frost rising into air behind them like breath. At the edge of Salal, she stops and looks back once, not to measure, to mark. He tips his chin, a pledge measured in inches. Then they vanish into the shrubs, taken by the same mercy that delivered her. The yard breathes again. Crows lift from the far fir like a thought the day forgot to finish. He stands until the cold finds his knuckles and reminds him he has a stove that needs feeding. Inside, the cabin has shifted in a way he can't name. The air feels larger. A draft moves from the door to the window and comes back as a hush. On the table where he left a cup is a stone the size of his palm. Basalt, river-smoothed, cool. 3 clean cuts run across its face, shallow, side by side, spaced like drum beats. Next to it lies a small branch of Douglas fir, fresh, a sprig with pitch that threads his fingers when he lifts it. His cup has not moved. The door was latched. The house carries no footprints because houses don't know how to hold those. He sits without meaning to. The chair finds him and takes the weight he has been carrying years past reason. He sets the fur on the stone and fits his thumb into the middle notch. The groove lands where the half-moon scar on his hand does, and the fit is too exact to be chance. His eyes burn. He lets them. He learned long ago that there is water you throw at flame and water you keep because it heals what fire can't reach. Memory doesn't let go easily. It tries to take him to 76 again, to sirens and red dirt, and a door that would not open fast enough. The old accusation comes up hard. Then something new stands in front of it. A hand on his shoulder, heavy enough to be true, light enough to forgive. 3 marks cut by a mind that meant comfort, not control. A sprig set like a blessing on a table made by his own hands. The ledger in his chest doesn't flip to a blank page. It simply stops shouting. That is enough. Outside, a breeze starts in the draw and runs a low finger along the porch boards. The ridge answers with a faint, far sound. Not urgent, not a call to arms. 3 taps somewhere up the slope, easy as a mother telling a child the way home. He stands, slides the stone into his coat pocket like a relic, and lays the fur on the windowsill above the sink. He feeds the stove, checks the hatch, steps out to the yard, and touches the fence post with his palm. Warm still. The day will darken again. Men will circle back with new maps and newer words, but the line between house and timber is no longer a line. It is a bridge that knows his name. He listens until the quiet fills up with meaning, then answers the only way that fits. 3 measured knuckles to the wood, spaced for breath, firm enough to carry. The sound goes up the hill and out across trees, and something in the fog lifts its head and listens back. The moment does not end. It holds, the way a note holds in a church when no one is left to sing. and that held sound is the shape of a future he will have to step into, one careful footfall at a time. Sometimes, the most enduring bonds are the ones that cross the lines we were taught to see. In the stillness between two heartbeats, trust can rise from the unlikeliest of places. Fragile at first, then rooted so deeply it outlives fear. In a world that moves too fast to notice the quiet, moments of true connection remind us that we are not as different as we think. The earth keeps her own language, and if we choose to listen, not just with our ears, but with the patience of our whole being, we may find we have always been part of the same story. Forgiveness is rarely loud. It arrives like the first hint of dawn, unnoticed until the light has already changed. It is not about forgetting the past, but about loosening its grip on the future. In that release, there's room for something else to grow. A bridge where there was once a chasm, a path where there was only underbrush. And sometimes, the one who chooses to trust is not the one who speaks, but the one who steps forward without demanding proof. There is a kind of courage in protecting what cannot speak for itself, in standing between harm and the vulnerable without asking for recognition. Acts like that ripple outward, carried on in ways we'll never measure, shaping futures we'll never see. The measure of a life is not in the walls we build to keep ourselves safe, but in the doors we dare to open, knowing they may let in the wild, the wounded, and the wondrous all at once. Perhaps the greatest lesson the forest offers is that survival is not just about strength, but about interdependence. Trees lean on one another in storms. Roots knit together in the dark. Even the most solitary beings leave traces that guide others home. The truth is, none of us stand alone. Not really. We are held up by the invisible threads of trust, mercy, and shared existence. And maybe, in the end, that's the heart of it. That life is less about guarding what's ours, and more about guarding the space where trust can live. That when we choose compassion over conquest, and patience over possession, we stand in service to something older and greater than ourselves. The world will not always meet us with kindness, but every time we answer it with understanding instead of fear, we widen the circle. And sometimes, if we're lucky, the world answers back, not with words, but with a quiet gesture that says, "You kept faith. You mattered. Thank you for walking through this story with us." If it stirred something in you, if it reminded you of the power of trust or the quiet strength of compassion, share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear what you took from it. And if you want to be here for the next journey, don't forget to follow, subscribe, and stay with us. There are more stories waiting out there where the lines blur and the human heart still listens.